Let's talk about the coaches. James Hird, obviously, with the coffees and I think some sort of questionnaire that's been sent out to the potential candidates. How many do you think are actually open to being candidates and fighting the fight against James Hird?
It's a great question, and this is the next part of their process, because you can reach out to as many people as you want, but as we've seen today, Nathan Buckley is the first example of someone who said thanks but no thanks. I don't actually want to be a part of the process. He's all in on Tasmania. So how many other people will either say they're a part of the Carlton process through these assistant coaches and we're happy with that, or just no thanks altogether, I'm not ready? And does that actually count to the process? Because
that's an unusual excuse, though. I'm part of the Carlton process, isn't it? I don't want to be part of yours.
It would be, but also this is an unusual situation.
No, it is.
It's a completely unique situation. So James Hird will have his first catch-up with the Bombers next week. They are, as you say, reaching out to other prospective candidates and options to gauge their interest this week. The questionnaire has gone out, I think, via email. John Longmire is expected to be a part of those calls. Whether he takes them up at this point, I think is unclear. His still priority, I think, is Tasmania, but he's also looked at the Carlton role and they've got a level of interest in him. But that process with the senior coaches won't take part for another little bit from a Carlton perspective. They want to get through all their interviews with their assistant coaches. I think they're up more than 6 now that they've met over the past couple of weeks, Richo.
And is Ken Hinkley ruled out of Essendon?
I don't think he'll be going to Essendon. I think we can rule that out.
So the only one is really Longmire now. Buckley's out, Hinkley's out.
Yep.
And you're not sure on Longmire?
Not sure on Longmire.
Of the ex-coaches.
Of the
ex-coaches.
Because surely they would want one of those if they're available. To interview.
To interview, yes.
Yeah.
To interview. All the way through, I've never been sure about Essendon's interest in John Longmire as a candidate.
So why would that be?
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
Because of the way he finished at Sydney? Or
I think there was levels of people who knew that there was probably a time for a spell at the end of...
Yep.
And look, he knew, didn't he? He departed with a year to go on his contract and handed over the reins, knowing that he couldn't go through another season after that last grand final. So there's that part of it. And also, do people... And if it isn't James Hird, do they want the next best young coach?
Yeah, well,
because the record shows, as we know...
No doubt it does. And Damien Hardwick's the latest example of someone who couldn't be better credentialed to take over a second club. And at this stage, it hasn't worked for him.
Well, if you look at history, it doesn't often work. Mick Malthouse worked a second time, obviously, at Collingwood, a third time. Lee Matthews at Brisbane, but there's plenty of examples where it hasn't.
They're about the only two this century, aren't they, to go and win a premiership. So there's
the Sydney connection with the Essendon job I find quite interesting.
Yep.
You've got Simon Goodwin, who I think is not going to go. He is ruled out going for Essendon. You've got Mark McVeigh, who has, I think, played it well. He's been very quiet in the whole thing. Will he go against his good mate?
Yep.
And then you've got John Longmire, which you've already said, and they're all pretty close. They all know they've all worked together. So that's a little interesting sideline.
Can I just ask it direct here, right? So James Hird's all chips in. We know he wants it. He's been very vocal about it. Is it almost impossible now for anyone else, as a first-time coach, as an assistant coach, to coach Essendon with the landscape? It'd be impossible for them, wouldn't it?
It'd be a hard landscape to walk into, wouldn't it?
How do you walk into that if they don't give it to James Hird with the supporter base that appears to want him? It just seems like a poison chalice.
The bit that I think, Campo, is interesting to that as well is that who can shepherd this team through the next few years and the weight of disappointment that's going to come. I mean, whoever coaches this team over the next 2 to 3 years is in for some more pain. They've gone through some pain. They're actually doing it the right way, I think.
Hasn't this disastrous back half of the year in a way helped whoever takes over, though? Like, it's lowered the expectations dramatically.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just purely from an expectation point of view.
James Hird. I don't know about any as new assistant.
No, but anyone... Oh, you're right. Yeah. It probably has helped Hirdy more than anyone. But anyone who comes in, the expectations of winning are extremely low.
Yeah, and we've seen that in Dean Solomon's 5-game stint as well. There were some hopes at Essendon that the second half of their season would be better than their first. They'd get
he said that, didn't he?
He said that. Yep. Their board has said that. Their hierarchy has said that. They'd hope they'd get some players back from injury because they did have a shocking injury run in the first half of the season as well. They'd hope their younger players would continue to come on, which they have to some degree. But the pressure of the season has become too much for them, Campo. And you're seeing them now tick off week by week, hoping for the end of the season. This is an extremely unhappy footy club at the moment. I know that.
Yeah.
The players are unhappy. The game plan isn't working. The confusion is there week to week. I think anyone who has a semblance of an idea of what a team is trying to do can look at last Sunday's game and go, they don't understand it to the degree they have to. What do you? I'm interested in your thoughts on the players being involved in a survey about the qualities and attributes required for the next senior coach. What did you think about that? Because the senior players are involved, the larger group of players are involved in that. Is it the right move?
Oh, I think you can canvass the players, but I'm not sure it's like cement. I think you go around and ask them, and that's what you do in a business world as well. You go and ask your employees, what can we get better at? Where can we improve? And get that feedback. But I think you take it for what it is, because the players don't necessarily always know the intricate details. They're there to play and perform and prepare as best they can. The dynamics and the mechanics are two completely different things for mine when it comes to selecting coaches. I'm with you, Cal, in terms of if it was John Longmire, he's strong enough as a person and what he's got in his background to, I guess, deflect any of those next 2 years of the pain that they may or may not have.
Yeah, and it probably feels like he's the only one who could walk in there with that.
And a level of respect
with
straight
that
away.
Respect behind him.
100%.
And some gravitas.
That could command the whole club. And then, and I know, we would all know people who have worked at Sydney or played for Sydney, and he just drives the standards. That's just what he does. He just drives and drives and drives. So that's exactly what they need.
And is that what the club needs?
Yeah.
Is that what they, like from the outside looking in, that's what they need? They need someone to come in and drive the standard of what that footy club needs and wants to be again.
A little bit of the Sydney model is coming through in their approach to the criteria as well, because they're looking at the Sydney model as saying, as we spoke about earlier, Leon Cameron, a coaching background, a really experienced footy boss. He's got an assistant coaching panel now, Dean Cox, that has experience everywhere you look. Simon Gooden, of course, I think will get back into senior coaching at some point when the role is right, but what an asset he's been to Sydney this year in terms of bringing him in. So as Essendon goes through its next steps, look, the pressure is high on Dan McPherson in his role. He's asked for reassurance recently about whether he will be there at the end of this year and hasn't been able to get it from Essendon. So,
well, I think this is one of the issues for Dean Solomon, as it is for the whole club. There's be a lot of people there thinking they're not going to be there next year. So that does make it difficult for Dean Solomon, because they were appointed essentially by Brad Scott, all those
including their best player and another one of their best players in Zach Merritt and Jordan Ridley.
The comments from Chris Scott regarding Nathan Buckley during the week, how did you read those?
I read them like everybody else. I thought it was a not so subtle swipe at James Hird. I think that was clear, wasn't it? And you can read it both ways. It was also a supportive arm around Nathan Buckley and his hopes to be an assistant coach. From assistant coach to be the Tasmanian head coach. But I also think, and look, I've sat on a panel. I've said this the last time I've sat on a panel with Hirdy throughout this year, so I've been able to see firsthand the amount of footy he watches. And you guys work with a lot of people in the industry. Sometimes you can see people who come in, don't watch much footy, and are able to get by. Yeah. That's not the case with James Hird. I've seen that firsthand. So, and also how invested he is in the Port Melbourne story as well. And that has been a big part of his last couple of years. And though he isn't coach, he's extremely involved there. And
so you're rejecting what Chris Scott's saying?
Yeah, I think I am. Yeah. I am. Yeah, I believe that his connections around the game too are, I think, more considerable than you might expect to. So that from that point of view, I don't think you'd step in and say that he doesn't know what's going on.
So Hirdy's got to Cal.
No, sounds like it, doesn't it?
I think he's got the job.
Cal will be pushing for it.
He's one of the most powerful blokes in footy. Don't worry about that. How big? It's a good question.
Campo's been a coach.
Well, you've been a coach and you've been in the media. So how different is it on the outside to the inside then?
No, it is completely different. Because from the outside, you can say, oh, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. It's not quite as easy as that. And I get frustrated. And I've sort of gone down the coach's line when I try and do my analysis, because you want to be fair and equitable to the coaches, because I just know how hard it is to try and manipulate things, trying to get lists right, trying to get players, in form.
But could you walk back in to AFL land now?
I think I could, yeah.
Yeah, so you would.
Yeah. How many years out now, Campo?
End of 2019 I finished.
Yeah.
But I think And I'm a bit like Hurdy. I watch a lot of footy and do a lot of
So you
live
think
games, a lot of analysis, and I do a couple of segments during the week in Adelaide. So I feel like I'd be a better coach now than when I
So
coached.
you think you
perhaps
could
all
walk
those years
into
ago.
a process now and
Absolutely,
apply?
yeah.
And
Well,
there's
so that's
many,
7 years.
Yeah, and
so,
there's so many people around. Like, if Hurdy's not dumb, like, he
Yeah,
would put
no.
the right people around him. So,
And I think part of it is too, and I spoke about the mechanics and the dynamics. The mechanics is the game plan. The dynamics is essentially what happens around the footy club and the environment you create. So they're the two pillars that you've got to be able to get right. Now, if you're really strong in one, in the mechanics, you need to try and find assistants that help with the dynamics. And that's the art of putting a coaching group together. And that's why Dean Cox and I think what Justin Longmuir is doing, they've got that balance really well.
How much of it is man management, managing each player and personal relationships?
It's a good question.
Is it more so than it's ever been? And then you let your assistants and other people do the tactics. And
you've still got to.
I think your
respect the
assistants,
senior coaches.
Absolutely.
Footy
I think your
IQ.
assistants are crucial in man management because they're the conduit between the players and you. So you can get really, like sometimes the players, you're talking about an 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, they find it quite overwhelming trying to go and speak to a senior coach. So your assistants are critical in that dynamic to make sure that you get the right feedback and you also can touch off with those players as well, you know, if they're not either in form or they're struggling or they're in a good headspace.
Before you leave us, Cal.
Yeah, some big news today. So the AFL is set to introduce an additional Category B rookie spot for clubs to be able to draft an Indigenous player to add to their list for the 2027 season. So this has been debated, worked through for a number of months now. The AFL told the working group, which comprises clubs, officials, list managers, recruiters today, that the move would be going ahead for 2027. Still requires absolute tick-off from the AFL Commission, but this is a move to boost numbers of Indigenous players on the lists of AFL clubs, but also AFLW teams, Richard.
So, Cal, I think the numbers are down from about 87 to 62 since 2020. Have they identified the reasons why the numbers have dropped?
Not as much as the environmental challenges of stepping into a club, but they've also spoken today and released some data to the clubs about how they're actually seeing the progress of next generation academy players rise up and the numbers of Indigenous players from about 12 to 16 and then 16 to 18, the representation grow over the past sort of 3 to 4 years. So there's hopes now that that will actually bleed into the AFL system.